For those of you I haven't met, I'm Katie Sonnenborn with Sarah Workna on the Zoom somewhere. We are the co-directors of Skowhegan. I'm very grateful to have you all here tonight. For those of you who haven't joined a virtual program yet, we welcome questions. We ask that you send them to everyone in the chat. Jamie Bennett's going to be moderating, and we'll have some time at the end also for an open Q&A, as Carrie just said. It is really nice to be ending the 2020 year on tonight's inspiring program. This has been a historic year, a crazy year, a challenging year, and it feels good to end with this inspiring trio of speakers who each in her and his own way provides a path forward for a more equitable and just future in America. So thank you, Kat and Aggie and Jamie, for being with us tonight. I suspect this trio needs little introduction, but there are so many accolades among them that I'm going to call out a few things. Aggie is a philanthropist, an art patron, collector, an arts education and social justice advocate. A few of the shining stars among her constellation of achievements and accomplishments. She's president emerita of the Museum of Modern Art, chairman of its International Council, chairman emerita of MoMA PS1, now chairing its new Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. In 1977, she created the transformative public-private partnership Studio in a School to provide arts education programming in New York City. She received the National Medal of Arts from President Bill Clinton and was nominated by President Barack Obama to the Board of Trustees of the National Council on the Arts. This February, she received the first ever Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg Women of Leadership Award, along with her sister-in-law, Anne, and the Gund family. She has been a long time, really important supporter and friend to Skowhegan, and she was recognized by the Board of Governors in 2006 with their Service Award for Outstanding Service to Artists. Her daughter, Kat, is the founder of Alban Pictures, an Emmy-nominated producer, director, and activist. Her work focuses on strategic and sustainable social transformation, arts, culture, HIV/AIDS, and reproductive health. Projects include Shavala, about the iconic Latin American gender-bending diva, Dispatches from Cleveland, America, Born to Fly, What's on Your Plate, A Touch of Greatness, and Hallelujah, Ron Athy, which has been featured on PBS, Discovery Channel, and Netflix. Our moderator, Jamie Bennett, is the executive director of Art Place America, a public-private partnership collaborating to envision a future of equitable, healthy, and sustainable communities, and positions art and culture as a core sector of community planning and development. He was previously chief of staff at the NEA and chief of staff at the New York Department of Cultural Affairs, and has provided strategic counsel to the Agnes Gund Foundation, served as chief of staff to the president of Columbia University, and worked in key roles at MoMA, the New York Philharmonic, and Columbia College. It's an absolute honor to be with you tonight. Thank you, Kat, for making it possible for the Skowhegan community to view Aggie in advance of this evening. And thank you for sharing the remarkable story of your mother's brave philanthropy with the world through this film. Aggie, thank you for letting her share this story with us. You are an inspiration and a role model to artists, to arts workers, to other philanthropists. And through this film, we aspire that your reach and your voice and your influence will be that much greater. So thank you for being with us tonight. Jamie, do you want to kick us off?
Awesome, Katie, thank you so much. And I think the only thing Katie left out of my introduction is that, of course, I play a starring role in this film, Aggie. My white capri pants and I
are in the closet.
A pivotal plot point in Aggie's closet in the 1990s. So as Katie said, we're going to be sort of informal. We're with friends and family, quite literally, in some cases, looking at who's with us. And I'd really love to encourage folks to use the chat and to interact. And in fact, I'd love you all to help me out with something, tee up something in a minute. I'm old enough to sort of remember Phil Donahue and sort of the talk shows where people would come on the screen and you would get these sort of great 3, 4, 5-word bios under your name when you'd be introduced. You know, mother who can't take it anymore, father who changes gender, all of that sort of stuff. So I'm wondering if folks, everyone here knows Aggie, many of you, all of you hopefully have seen the film. Do me a favor and drop in your 5-word bio of Aggie in the chat. If you had to sum up this wonderful woman in pink with 3 words, 4 words, 5 words. Drop them in the chat, and we're going to come back to that in a minute. But Catherine, I actually wanted to start with you because as I was getting ready for this tonight, I realized there's a question I've never asked you. And it's, of course, dangerous to ask a question you don't know the answer to. But what is your origin story as a filmmaker? How did you sort of arrive to that? How did you turn into become, how did that become your superpower?
When did it become? Thank you. First, thank you to Skowhegan. Thank you, Sarah, who I know, and Jamie, who I adore, and Carrie and Katie and everybody. And it's very fun to see everyone's faces. I do like the Zooms better when we feel like a community and it's almost like being in person and you can look at people and respond to people and feed off of how people are responding to what you're saying. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you having your cameras on. And I both have an extreme trepidation about appearing with Jamie, but also I've looked forward to this since the second I knew it was going to happen, because I knew it would be fun and very personal, because that's how he rolls. So how did I start? I mean, I think, it's interesting because I have a bunch of kids who are right at the point of sort of making choices about their lives and deciding if they're going to graduate school or what sort of jobs they're going to take and what kinds of relationships they're going to be in. And the other night, one of them said, it wasn't the other night, but during quarantine, which was all just one long night, they said, it looks like you know what you were doing all along, that, you've always known what you were doing and your life makes so much sense. And I feel like that's kind of what I was trying to do with this movie, was like make the decisions Aggie's making right now make sense in the past. And I feel like in doing that, I actually started answering or asking at least that question of myself and started answering it a little bit. And I think that what I did, I was painting. I went to the Whitney program after Brown. I worked in collectives. I hated television. I still do, although I did my first binge in the last 2 weeks. I watched all 6 seasons of Schitt's Creek in your honor, Jamie, because you're living in Canada. And I loved it, but I hated television. I never was thinking I'd be a filmmaker, but I started putting words on my paintings, and I was working with all these political organizations and collectives and people, and we started using media really as a tool. And I just became obsessed with it because I realized if I made the media and put it on the television, then that's what people would see instead of the trash that I felt took over the airwaves. So it's always been kind of a means to an end, and never like, although I am getting very excited about making another movie, just because it's not a solitary experience for me. It's such a collective experience, both because of the politics, but also because we work with our own communities and partner organizations and whatnot from the beginning of every project. It's really how we can help a movement, which was actually the source and the genesis of this film, was for the criminal justice reform movement. And so this idea of spending another 6 months alone without my team and my close collaborators who function much better in person, I think maybe I'll try to just make a movie because it's a movie. But I haven't done that before. And I think for that way, you can look at them, Ron Athey, which is sort of his whole company, Elizabeth Streb, and the company she created, What's on Your Plate, is about bringing you to this other world. Like, I'll take you there. The Staple Singers, I've realized during quarantine, is my anthem. And that this is just another example of that. And if I can use a term that I have gotten more comfortable with in its broadest sense, is that I feel like I'm just trying to depict an abolitionist place. Like, I am trying to show what a world would look like that would be a positive, good, just, fair environment. And What's on Your Plate is these kids saying, we want to live in a world where we can ask questions and make decisions for ourselves about food justice and where our food comes from and why it makes so many people sick. And I think, in Ron's, it's like, just give us that world that we can live in. So that's a long-winded and whirly answer, but I think that's kind of where the film fits into my trajectory. Maybe it's not the source of how I use them. Did I answer your question?
You
Jim?
answered it perfectly. No, I love that whole trajectory. And Aggie, so the question that I wanted to start out with you is, I think for many of us, the opening scene of the film, the sort of pre-title scene, is just perfect, right? You and Catherine in the back of the car, and you saying that your only wish for this film is that not too many people see it, right? It's this sort of perfect Aggie moment. Why, when Catherine came to you and said, I want to make a film starring you, I want to put your name up on the marquee, I want this to be all about you, why did you say yes?
Well, I didn't really say yes because it wasn't planned as it was going to be a film, and then I was going to be the main person in it. So I didn't say yes to that. That it evolved into that. You know, Catherine wanted me to do some talks with her kids, and that's where we were when
I was surprised she even said yes to that. But it's true that as someone notoriously camera shy, shunning the spotlight, I had just proposed doing some interviews because I thought it would be good. I'm obsessed with archives. I thought we would have some, and our interview was boring. So then I asked the kids to do it, and it was beautiful. And we were like, oh, well, we could just ask a couple other people to do it. And we did that. And after about 10 of these conversations, Tanya Silverratnam, my producing partner, said, you really should make a movie. And the only reason I entertained the idea of making the movie was because of Art for Justice. And I thought, well, this was such a resounding example of something new and different, and I thought incredibly powerful and effective, that other people could do. I wanted to generate sort of a blueprint for that. And I never asked her, after we started making it a movie, to your point, Jamie, I didn't ask her why she did it until it was over, because I was afraid if I asked her, she'd be like, wait, we're making a movie. Let's not.
So, so Aggie, once again, you got a little bit snookered by your daughter, is that right? A little
No.
bait and switch?
That's what it sounds like.
But sit with this for just a second, because as long as I've known you, Ag, you don't like the spotlight. You sort of don't like being in the spotlight behind the podium on center stage. And yet you keep putting yourself in positions to do that as long as it helps someone else, right? As long as you can help move something forward, you do that. So just talk a little bit about that, sort of what it's like to be the center of attention, why you've done that, what that's been like for you.
What do you mean? What it's like to be the center of attention? I don't like that very well.
Right, but when the Park Avenue Armory needed a savior, you came in and sort of took on a MoMA trustee in public. Or when we needed a face for the HIV/AIDS fight, you went and worked with babies. I mean, you've consistently sort of put your body where it needs to be, even when you don't like it.
Well, when I was younger, that was more likely to happen. At this point, it's not likely to happen. And so, you know, that it's a very different time right now. But, you know, everybody keeps saying it's a different time, but, you know, I wonder what is going to happen forward from now, because today was an exciting day, but yet, you know, people still don't know if it was really, if this is going to work and if it will help to, you know.
You're deflecting from the question, which was about why.
Well,
But Jamie, I don't know if you heard when you were talking, she said, because you asked her to do the Park Avenue, and that's exactly what she said to me. When I did ask her afterwards, I said, why did you let me make this film? And she said, because you asked me. And I feel like actually in that answer is a deep answer, which is about trust and about saying, I'll do things when people I love and respect and want to help propose something. You know, she tried so many of the people on this call, so many people, and is willing to work with them and will do what they think is the best idea. Right? I mean, that is what you said, that you said, I asked you and you didn't think I would do something wrong.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of trust. And we'll save the chat after so you can look at it, but people are using all sorts of words to describe you that I don't know that you would ever use to describe yourself. A visionary, a hero. You might call yourself a girl from Cleveland. All sorts of amazing things. But in many ways, this film really makes a case for you as an activist, right? One of the things, Catherine, I was really honored when she invited me in to look at a rough cut of the film. And I sort of began to think of your career in chapters, the sort of activism you did around education in the 70s with founding Studio in a School, the activism with the HIV/AIDS community in the 80s, the work at MoMA that you did as its president in the 90s, the Art for Justice work that you've been doing in the 2000s. Do you, Aggie, ever use the word activist to describe yourself? Is that how you ever think of yourself?
No, because activism has changed. Where it was when I was young was not the way it is now. Remember the 50s and the 60s and the 70s were really not terms where we saw ourselves, any of us. Dorothy, would you have seen yourself as an activist? I don't think so.
You have to unmute though. Wait, yeah.
I mean, I was against the war in Vietnam and I marched. I guess that was activism in those days. And
Yep.
of course, choice for women's choice. That was really important. But yeah, you're an activist, Aggie.
No, but not in the same sense that it is today. I mean, not the way people are activists that are marching and that, you know.
Well, you would be marching. I mean, if you hadn't fallen and hurt your leg, you would be marching. I saw a photograph of you with your pussy hat. So
I love those pussy hats. I thought
I
they,
do too.
and I wish we'd revive them and, you know, could all go out and, in a gang and you know, pussy hats.
I just want to say that I believe if you see something wrong, Aggie, you cannot bear to see people suffering or going without or hurting, and you take it on yourself to try to do something about it in big and small ways.
But you know, it's so big on what Trump's doing in executing people. I just can't stand that. And I've been trying to get in touch with,
Brian.
no, I did get in touch with Brian, but other people to talk about what they can do. Helena Wang, I've called her over and over to see if there isn't something we can do to make this stop. I realize it's only 4 people that he has on the docket to kill, but nobody should be killed. Now we should be beyond that, beyond and way leaving it in the past, that you don't kill people, that even if they've killed other people, because it doesn't.
Well, our justice system isn't fair, really. So we don't even know if people are really guilty because justice system is so unfair.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pass it back to Jamie.
Well, Dorothy, you can please stay as long as you want. But Ag, in some ways, this tees up an interesting question that I was going to get to a little bit later. But my understanding of your vision of the Art for Justice Fund, one of the reasons that you wanted to sell that extraordinary picture by Roy and really put $100 million into this, is you really wanted to abolish the prison industrial system. You really wanted to say, here's a lot of money, let's do some good work and let's get this done and different, not incremental change. So now that you're, what is it, 3 years in, 4 years into the Art for Justice work, how's that going? What's the progress been like over the last 4 years? As heartbroken as we are over these folks who might lose their lives through federal execution, how is all of the work going?
Look, it really is something that I think has built on being, built, because as Dorothy knows, Roy would have probably been in favor of this, and it's been built from a place where we really thought this was important, but didn't realize how important it was, and what we were getting into, and the fact that justice is served. We've met a number of people, not as many as Catherine's met, that have been victims of this, group of people that have been incarcerated far too long, and
it's been incredible to be on this wave. There, even 4 years ago, there were so many fewer, certainly philanthropists, but after this summer, Color of Change membership went from like 150,000 people to 6.5 million people. I'm sorry,
Just
we
a
have to get
second.
this dog. Are you gonna take? I'm
I'm
sorry, I
gonna
love the
take-
dog.
Yes, you do. You certainly do.
Okay, we're gonna, okay, there it goes. Hopefully she'll come back in a minute, but we have Art for Justice has done some really amazing things. And I think part of what we've realized that's been so powerful has been the community that's been created among the artists and activists and the philanthropists. It's sort of a three-legged stool, if you will. Like everyone is a part of the community, but I also think people are being, especially after the summer with the embrace of mutual aid as an idea of something, to Dorothy's point, that everyone can participate as an activist, that suddenly, and if you did get to see the movie, Ava says it, artists are activists are imagining something that's not there on a blank canvas and making it happen. And I think we've really created an acknowledgement of the sweet spot of where those things all come together, and been able to build on it. And I think more and more people feel a part of it, more people understand. They're able to use, before, a few years ago, Black Lives Matter, that was so, militant. And now you say defund the police and they're like, well, Black Lives Matter, but I don't know about defund the police. And, so we're getting people to start to understand, I think, what the issues are. And we've given over $82 million and I think, to your point, it's a 5-year spend down that Aggie really was all about saying, let's get the money out into the field. We don't need to sit on an endowment and create a small group of people who will make choices. Let's move the money to the leaders, primarily formerly incarcerated leaders, and certainly leaders of color and a lot of women, that, let's let people actually have the resource they need and make the moves. They're closer to the problems, they're closer to the solutions, and they're the furthest from the resources. And so we do, luckily for this community to have this incredible gift of a 6th year now, which is made up of the contributions of other collectors, of now artists. Mark Bradford started by giving us a whole edition 2 years ago, and he sold 40 pieces, the entire edition, and Hauser and Wirth gave us took no fees, and the entire $1 million came to Art for Justice. And all the money that comes into Art for Justice goes straight out, because Ford and Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, our partners, cover all administrative and staffing fees and everything. So, it's a very giving environment. It's one where people can feel their best selves, and everyone can participate, and everyone can count themselves as an activist, no matter what they do.
I think that's great. And Aggie, while you were sort of dealing with the blessed dog, who I love as much as Catherine, Catherine was talking a little bit about how activism and sort of the art world of MoMA don't always sit easily together, right? Most artists I know have been part of social justice movements, but sometimes art institutions lag a little bit. And there's a sort of favorite story about a photo shoot. I think it was for Vanity Fair when you were just becoming president of MoMA, and your daughter Catherine showed up in an interesting T-shirt. Would you share a little bit about that story?
Shirt I wore.
Well, the shirt said,
Silencio es muerte. Silence equals death.
yes, that was the silence equals death. And I thought, you know, that it was for a Christmas thing, and I thought it was inappropriate to wear for Christmas.
I think it was for the Vanity Fair photo shoot,
well,
the article
okay,
about you.
Okay.
I thought it was a
could have
very
been-
good place to put that out there.
Well, anyway, it got out there and no one was hurt, and no one lost their soul over it, and it was fine. So it was something that I didn't realize would happen. I thought people would say this isn't the right shirt for the right moment, and it was fine. So.
Well, I love that. And I love that you've been sort of sneaking radical ideas into the MoMA boardroom for, you know, what, since 1968 or whenever your association with the museum began. One of the other things that I think a lot about with the two of you, and it's also interesting to think about it against the backdrop of Skowhegan, with Sarah and Katie as the leaders, with Anne Gund as the board chair, are sort of women as leaders. And it's something that's very clear throughout the film that I don't know that a man could have done many of the things that you did, Aggie. There's something very specific to women's leadership and a women's style of leadership. How do you sort of think about that? What was it like to be the president of MoMA? What was it like to sort of be the, you know, I think of that.
Well, the president of MoMA, I didn't accomplish much, but what studio in the school, I feel that Pat Hewitt and I started an organization that was really, you know, has been really very important, and does have a lot of depth to it. We have a wonderful leader now in Allison Smith, who's really very good at leading, and she works very well with Tom Cahill, who runs the Institute, and it's really developed into a very, and Dorothy knows this because she is the liaison for the Institute, and you know, Ken is Ken who runs the is head of the who's Ken Cooper, who is head of the other, you know,
The program that studio does in the schools, the long-term program.
yeah, and the long-term program.
There you go. I love how you framed it, Jamie, because it's not like, oh, what weren't you able to do because you were a woman? Like, what losses did we take by having you in charge? It's actually written the other way, which is how much more we were able to achieve. And, you know, I also hadn't thought about that until I made this film. And not only did she have 4 kids, I have 4 kids. People are always saying, oh, you could have made so many movies if, you know, it's nice you chose to be a mom and have kids and also be a filmmaker. And, you know, but if you don't have kids, you can do all this more. And I thought none of the films I've made could have been made, the ones since I've had kids since the Ron one. So for the last 25 years, none of those films would have been what they are if I didn't have kids. So, you know, I think we have to stop framing women's leadership as what is given up, you know, oh, we have to let them have, you know, maternity leave, or, oh, we have to, whatever, what we're losing instead of what we're gaining. And, you know, this whole notion of diverse managers in the finance field, like that's not about sort of counting beans or whatever it's called, bean counting. It's really saying we actually have more perspective, more vision, and arguably a lot of other skills and experiences that are brought to a given problem that we're charged with solving. And women's leadership has demonstrated time and time again. And let's celebrate today. I mean, everyone's saying, thank God the Electoral College made its thing today. So now we know Trump is out of the fucking White House. But what we also know is there is a woman, a Black and South Asian woman, who is the vice president of this country. That is a huge deal.
Yeah.
You know, next time she'll be president, or another woman, or another, you know, woman of color, or what, you know, like, I think that we need to look at what is gained in those situations.
Well, I should have looked this up. I think it was almost 50 years ago that Gloria Steinem said something to the effect that some of us are finally having the courage to raise our daughters more like our sons, but when are we going to have the courage to start raising our sons more like our daughters? And really thinking about male and female leadership as complementary and how it comes together. Because this is such a close group, I want to turn, go back to the conversation, get some more questions in, and we'll get to that in about 5 minutes. But before we do that, this is an art group. This is a group of artists and art collectors. And in the film, there's a really beautiful story, Aggie, about sort of how you started your collecting. Miss McLennan at Farmington, who got you started collecting postcards. And then famously, I think it was a Henry Moore piece that was one of the first significant works of art that you bought. But through you, I've met enough collectors to know that the more interesting question is, what is the one that got away? When you think back over your collecting life, what is the one piece? What is the one work that you almost had that you don't have today? Because I know that's what you think about.
Well, it's a group of artists, and it was the Ben Heller collection. I was offered that collection. I was able to buy it, except for the fact that the bank where my father had worked and didn't allow that to happen. They said no when I asked them if I could buy that. And it's always been a question of mine, really important question, whether had I bought that, I would have been under pressure by people all the time to give them the Pollock, the Victor, the Newman that was so great, and on, all the collection that he had formed, that I would have been subjected to that instead of able to collect what I liked and what was important to me. So it's a fair trade-off to think about, but it's also, a curious subject that I will never be able to give up, because it would have made a lot of difference whether the pressure of having people ask me to give it to their collection would have been so, strong that I would have made some everything away.
Aggie, just as a little bit of context for folks who don't know, how old were you when you had this chance to get it?
It was in the 60s, and
25.
that I was in my late 20s. So,
but that's how
Catherine, some of us are a little fishy about our ages. You don't need to be that specific.
well, no, but I do think it's wonderful. And she told me that story once, and I immediately thought what she was just talking about is that if she had bought that collection, she wouldn't have this collection.
Right.
Because
so for folks that don't know, I mean, the Ben Heller collection included 2 Pollocks, including blue poles. I mean, it had some really extraordinary works in it, yeah?
One from the modern blue poles, and the wonderful one called Echo, which is a black and white Pollock, which is really magnificent, Pollock. But then there were three marvelous, not Liechtenstein's, Guston's. It had more than three Guston's. It had the Victoria Heroicus, the Newman, the big one that's in the modern now, and a lot of things that were important. But it went the way that things should go, which is to be dispersed over places and over time, where you don't have all of the great things in one bundle, and then only some people get that, and not a lot of people have the use of everything and a chance to see it, because it's all gone to great places. And you know, that's what builds up so many of the collections today, is that they're, over time, they become very different. The people that own them are very different.
That's
right.
amazing. Catherine, your home is filled with art. Every time I visit, the walls, the surfaces, everything's covered. Do you think of yourself as a collector? What's sort of the first work of art you remember acquiring in some sort of formal way?
That's interesting, because I didn't think of myself as a collector also until this movie. People, you know, when we first launched the movie in January, people said, "What did you learn about your mother?" And I thought, I already knew everything. I didn't learn anything. And over the course of the last like 6 months, I've realized there are all these new ways that I think of things. And one is, you know, because so many people watch the film and say, I can be a collector. I want to be a collector. I can put anything on the wall, and then I'm a collector. And it doesn't mean you have to collect, you know, a Jasper Johns. Like you can collect things you love, and that makes you a collector. And so then I had to sort of realize, yes, even though I would say 90% of the art in my house is made by someone I know, and the other 10% is gifts from this one. So, you know, they're by friends, and I'm lucky to have grown up with and be in a community of artists. So I know the artists. I know there's at least one on this call. Lucy, I have a beautiful piece by Lucy of Arthur, actually, in the house, a small piece that Aggie gave me. And, you know, and Zyveria and Terry Adkins gave me that incredible saxophone piece, Nenefar, you know, when he was just making stuff and sort of was like, here, that's too big for my space. Can I put it in your bedroom? And it's still there. And, you know, so there, and then, but I also have like my paintings up and my kids' paintings up. They all went to public school. They all participated in studio in a school. So they, you know, they've actually spent time, not only with me, but in school, creating and fantasizing and imagining and speaking about their work and thinking about how to solve problems that are created by the work they're trying to make. And so I have all of that stuff. And so I would say I certainly feel lucky enough to be a collector. But the first piece, do you remember this? The first time I ever like said, I liked a piece, and then Aggie bought it and gave it to me, and it's still in my house, is by Kathy de Monchaux. And it was a piece, do you remember that? And we walked in, it's in the corner, and it goes right up and down in the corner. It's the beautiful leather piece with these sort of flower shapes, shall we say, with little metal things sticking out of them. And it goes all the way up. And we were at a gallery, and she got it for me. And this was 30 years ago. And I couldn't believe it. And it was the most incredible thing to have. Somebody had made art, and there was the art, and you got to live with it, and see it. And I, you know, so.
Well, Aggie, something interesting that Catherine said is that most of the art she owns is by friends, is by people she knows. I'm willing to bet that's true of your collection as well. I mean, one of the things that's been amazing for me in knowing you is that not only can you talk about the work of art with the eye of a woman who's pedigreed by Harvard University and is a curator, but you can also talk about the person who made it. Do you think about the sort of people that you're collecting as well as sort of the works themselves?
Well, except for note pieces, which I'm looking at right now, which are Nigerian way back when nobody talked about note pieces, but they're, that's what's so nice about how they fit with this other art, because they do fit that way. And my ex-husband collected them and collected a lot of them. And I'm glad
Oh, those are the
they're-
ones you don't know, but there's Teresita and Mark Rothko and Christo and Martin Purrier and Stanley
Now,
Whitman.
you're both being very unfair to those of us on Zoom. Talk about the piece behind you.
Talking about your relationships with the artists.
Right, but look at the piece behind you. Tell us about that one.
Tell us about this John's map.
well,
There you go.
it-
You're being very unfair. Sorry, she doesn't like that this is on a precarious thing because I set up our little laptop. Okay, we'll talk about the artists that are your friends that you know. Well, how
well,
that changes your relationship to their work.
well, you know, I like the work of people that I like, or vice versa. I mean, whatever you want, whichever you want to, way you want to put it. I enjoy that aspect of it. And I wouldn't have that if they were, as I was trying to point out, no pieces that were early on, you know, done way before time. So
Before her time.
I
Amazing.
think there are too many people to, in the scope of things to talk about. Each person that I've known because of their art, like going across the room, Bob Gober and Guston, and I really liked Guston and his, you know, the various ways that he did things, that they came out of the realist and then went into, you know, doing work in a way that was very
Mhm.
um, uh,
Cartoons.
no,
No.
abstract. He was an abstract painter for a while. At
Mhm.
least underneath there might have been some meaning to what he was doing, but then he came back into the realist mode again. And I think he is one of the most interesting artists that there is, that now.
But that was also one of the reasons I did those conversations are almost all in the house. I mean, Kim Hastreiter was at her house and Raj Roy is at the Museum of Modern Art Theater, but most of the others are right here in the house. And it was to give this sense of like, what is it to just live in this space? Aggie's very generous, and Nicole, her curator, points out, you know, so many people say that artists have told her that more people see their work here than in the museums because the work is up, and she's so open to allowing and having, inviting people over, and how wonderful that is. But on the other hand, it's still a private home. So the idea of doing these interviews in the back of Julie Meritu's interview, you can see the Cornell box and the Guston, and, you know, in the back of Darren, you see the Rothko, in the back of Teresita, you see Teresita. So, you know, we went through the house and tried to have these conversations around the art because that's how Aggie lives. So in addition to what Katie said in the beginning about there's all these ways to be an activist, and the film shows you all these ways to be an activist and a philanthropist, you know, the real driver for me behind the film was really about the art, and that the way that Aggie sees the world through art is what has given her access to all these other activations.
Yeah, well, and I think of some of the logistics of living in your house, Aggie, and when the cats used to drink the milk out of the Wolfgang Leib milk stone, or was there Was there a Mary Frank torso in sand that the cats used to use as
And the
litter
sand
box?
cats would always go. It was terrible. Oh,
I love that. And then what's the great story? Who was the extraordinary woman, Sonia Lopez's aunt, who once passed judgment on a Christo piece?
Well, that's in the film.
That's in the film, right?
Yeah.
Was it Alice Wilkes? Was that Miss Wilkes' name?
She took the pieces at the bottles out of the box and put the box with the
and
recycling.
put the box in the trash. And I happened to notice that it wasn't there and went out and looked for it and found it in the trash. And so every time she went to throw a Kleenex box away, she would say, "Can I throw this out, or is this art?" Because the Christo does look kind of moth-eaten, to say the least. So
One of my favorite things in New York City is that you gave some money to the Nuyorican Poets Cafe in her memory. And whenever I go to the Nuyorican, I look up and the plaque is still there with her name. So even though I never met Aunt Alice, I think of her a lot. So we're going to open this up to folks, and feel free to use the raise hand feature, drop a question in the chat. And I've paid attention to who's on the call, so I'm not afraid to call on folks. But as you're getting your thoughts together, Catherine, the single best scene in the entire movie is not in the movie. And this is a story, Aggie, of you growing up down the road from Anita Contini and your father having a donkey named Floyd. So as folks are thinking through what they want to share with you, tell us a little bit about Floyd the donkey.
well, Floyd was a white donkey, and most donkeys aren't white, they're gray, I gather from no, but the donkeys I grew up with, I saw many in the Dominican Republic, and they're not the same color. I don't know why this was, but we spent a lot of time on that donkey or with that donkey, and it was a large part of our growing up, because we lived in the country and there wasn't anything, there were no other houses except the Anita's was down the street quite a ways, not the same street, but you know, there was not much to do but be outdoors. I remember thinking, thank goodness that there's something I can get a good grade on, and that's tadpoles, because I could bring a lot of tadpoles in for people to look at.
But I should say, Jamie, that if it's not up yet, it will be up soon. And on our website, if you go to aggiefilm.com/events or watch, one of those, there are some scenes that don't appear in the movie that we're now putting up on the website. And one of them is the second scene with Jamie, where he asks Aggie about how did you get onto it? The Zippo lighter. She said something about a Zippo lighter. And he says, when was the last time you used the Zippo lighter? And she said, when my brothers had me smoking cigarettes, but that was before the barn burned down. That was Floyd the donkey's barn. Like the whole, talk about a stream of semi-consciousness. It just went like that. So there are some extra scenes if people want to see Jamie more.
And just as a trigger warning, the scene does include the details about how Floyd died. So just be prepared, there is a donkey death at the end of the scene. Aggie, Frank Goodyear popped into the chat, and he's wondering about sort of this love of giving back that both you and Catherine seem to have. Is that nature, is that nurture? Where does that come from for the two of you? Where did you first get that impulse to give?
Well, mine is from guilt. I don't know what Catherine's is from.
Say another word about the guilt. Why do you feel guilt, Aggie?
Well, because I got so much, and you know, that so I've always felt that way.
I have very little patience for guilt, but in Aggie's case, I have a lot of patience because I feel like she moves from the place. And if you're going to feel guilt, we feel what we feel. You can't make yourself decide to feel something. And if that's how she feels about it, that's one thing. But the fact that she acts on it, you know, it's like empathy, and the empathy is this buzzword. And we all need to have empathy. And it's like, great, you do need empathy, but you can't stop there. And I feel like if the film demonstrates in spades how Aggie does feel guilt, but does something about it that impacts and changes the situation that has made her feel guilty in the first place.
This is an unfair thing to do, but I know Alex Herzan is watching, and I don't know if she's in a place where she can unmute. But Alex is an amazing philanthropist herself, and also the daughter of an amazing philanthropist, whose mother was a longtime trustee with Aggie before Alex was. And I can't quite, I have to switch my view to see if Alex is around. But I'm wondering, Alex, there you are, unmute yourself. And you know, what was giving back like? Where did that come from? You, your mom, your uncle? How did your family get in on it?
Hi, I love you guys. I think that there is a certain amount of guilt. I would agree with Aggie, but it was always a part of the family culture. So my cousins and my mother and her two siblings were very devoted to, you know, what could be called social justice in their day, but it was just, and it came from my grandfather. So, and then on the other side of the family, I had the Wasps, who were very tightwad. So,
so these are Mr. and Mrs. Van Ameringen, were the non-tightwads.
right.
And then Lily Auchincloss, your mom, and Henry Van Ameringen, your uncle.
Yes.
The folks that are doing that.
Yes, and then
That's
they're
it.
together. So.
Alex, here's another unfair question, then we'll open it up to someone else. What's your first memory of Aggie? Do you have a first memory of her?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, my very first memory of Aggie was when my mother had been diagnosed with lung cancer, and I knew that she wasn't going to make it. It was not a good thing. And she had been told that she had to go for radiation. And I was in my apartment, the phone rang, and this voice on the other end of the phone said, "Hi, it's me, Aggie." And I said, "Yes." I didn't know Aggie then. And she said, "Well, I was just wondering if your mother might like to be driven to her. I heard she was going through this and she might like to be driven to the radiation treatments." And I said, "Oh, no, that won't be necessary. She'll hire someone and it's all fine." And then I called my mother and I said, "Aggie called, she's from MoMA, and she wanted to know if you wanted to be driven to radiation." And my mother said, "Yes, oh, that's so great. Thank you so much. And Gaston is so handsome."
I know, that was why. That was
And I would love to go with Gaston. So then I had to call Aggie back up and explain. And then I remember meeting Aggie and just being completely overwhelmed by her generosity. And then there was one day when she came and drove us to radiation, and that was very funny. So that was another thing, because Aggie really wanted to talk to my mother. My mother was really worried about her keeping her eye on the road. So Aggie was doing this, and my mother was doing this. Anyway.
Oh, that's hysterical. Alex, thank you for that. And Cara Moore, who you probably remember from the days she was at MoMA with us, who's now working over at Bloomberg Philanthropies, is wondering a little bit about your visit to San Quentin. Darren Walker famously shared the photo of you visiting San Quentin with about 10,000 of his closest friends. What was that like? What did that feel like? What was that like walking into that place?
Well, it was really, I hadn't been to too many prisons. I avoided them. I had friends that were, uh, you know, Bundy Armstrong was a big prison abolitionist, giver, giver to prison help. And I had kept it at that distance. I didn't want to be in prisons. And yet when I went there, I found the people and what they were doing, especially in San Quentin, which was one of the first ones that I visited, really interesting, because they were doing so many things that were important. And I didn't know that I'd ever be able to be involved with what they were doing and how they were getting through this, and how some of them were not guilty, and so were not given just treatment. And I think I've learned a lot from it, and there's a lot I don't know too, so there's so much more to learn about. But I think that people who don't have family members, or who aren't themselves incarcerated or haven't been incarcerated, the only, I would ask anyone on here, if you haven't been incarcerated, if your family members aren't incarcerated, how do you know about incarceration? And it's from the mainstream media. It's from movies and television shows. And those things are, as we all know, but we don't always remain vigilant to resist these overwhelmingly stereotypical, inaccurate, criminalizing, horrible narratives. And I think that, as Aggie said, it's one of my favorite moments in the movie, actually, is when Aggie says to Darren, do you know people who don't think Art for Justice is a good idea? Because she was getting some pushback from some of her peers. And he said, of course, there's people out there who think somebody did something bad, they should be in prison. That's their punishment. They should pay for it. And that the prison system works just fine. And she just, her mouth drops open and she says, have they ever been to a prison? And in that moment, when you realize, like, oh, if you go into a prison, I mean, this Aggie, it could make me, like, I feel like I'm tearing up, because Aggie's response right now is, I went inside and I saw people doing things, making art and writing things and rehearsing things and singing and studying for their BA and, doing all the things anybody can do. And yet, she goes in, she doesn't see criminals. She sees artists and scientists and astronauts and journalists and all the people we are who are being buried alive. And it is literally because some people are white and some people are Black, and the Black people and the darker people are put in the prison and treated like they have no humanity and nothing to give to society. And they do. And they have families and they have their own brains and they have hearts and passions and visions. And I think everybody, not on some like tourist visa, but people should get involved and learn, whether it's watching a movie. You can watch 13th, you can watch the new brilliant masterpiece Time, which is on Amazon, and everybody should see it. It's like it goes with 13th very well, because it talks about one family's experience. And you can watch movies, you can read the books. Aggie keeps putting out book lists, or, if you get involved and you end up going inside, you will learn. When we went also to another one, which was horrible, which is right here in New York City, next to me downtown, which is the Tombs in Manhattan. And that is a horrible, I mean, they're all horrible, but that place, there is not an art studio. There is not a university program. It's just people just sitting there wasting. And
the Tombs and Rikers in particular are heartbreaking, because 90% of the people in those two places are just guilty of being poor, of not having enough money for cash bail. They're not guilty of anything else.
Put out they just put out the 80% of the people in the Texas prisons and jails who died of COVID were never convicted of a crime.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Rikers Island, there's a world in which Rikers Island is the largest mental health facility in the United States, but we don't run it that way. We don't organize it that way. We don't fund it that way. Carrie's going to move us into gallery view, and I'm going to ask us all to do something in just a second. So if anyone would like to turn on their camera, feels comfortable turning on their camera, do that, and we'll close out this session with a little bit of schmaltz. But while folks are doing that, Aggie and Catherine, think about some of the artists that you've met through Art for Justice, and I'd love for each of you to just give us the name of an artist that we should go out and Google if we don't know. Someone you've met through Art and Justice whose work you'd like each of us to carry with us as we leave this hour together.
Do you have some people?
Yeah.
Tamika Cole, I mean, there's so many people, and if I can just take that a little bit, take some leisure with your
Yeah.
I would recommend that people go to PS1 right now, has an exhibit called Marking Time, which is an incredible, incredible show. And MoMA's organized it so that there's a limited number of people.
PS1.
Oh, sorry, PS1, what did I say? MoMA. No, MoMA's PS1. PS1 in Queens, go there. It's on the first floor. There's only so many people allowed. Everybody's masked. You can go in and it will change your life. The quality of the art is so incredible. Some of it was made during quarantine, so it's very current. Some is very abstract. Some is very literal. There's a couple of our Art for Justice fellows in there, Jesse Crimes, James Yahya Huff, and Russell Craig. Tamika Cole, whose picture is on the Holland Cotter wrote an incredible review. It really is a great show, and I say it because it will open you to an experience of a lot of different artists, not just one, but there are many, and they're incredible, and they're going to go places and get better known.
That's awesome. I got snookered by Catherine. I asked for one and I got a whole exhibition. Aggie, who's one artist who particularly stays with you from the Art for Justice?
Well,
Russell Craig.
Russell is a very good artist and has a lot of breadth that he has going with him. And he's studying a lot and getting better and better. And
That's exactly right.
That's
He's so
awesome.
great, and he's been a fellow with Art for Justice from the beginning. And we took him and Jesse Crimes with us when we went to LA to meet with Mark Bradford in his studio, and Mark credits meeting Russell Craig and Jesse Crimes with why he contributed to Art for Justice.
That's awesome. Well, Catherine, you've given us an extraordinary gift with this film. Aggie, you've given us all an extraordinary gift with the sort of vision of a liberated future that might be possible with Art for Justice. And I know you both well enough to know that one of the many things that's been hard about this year is sort of missing connections and missing people. So one of the things I'd love to invite folks to do is one of the things I've learned in gallery view on Zoom is that we can all hold hands, even in this virtual space. And so if anyone would like to reach up and hold the hand of the person who's next to them on the screen and just think about 2021, think about sort of what's going to be possible next year when we're together, think about sort of the loving embrace in which we all hold each other. And I'll just sort of be quiet for a second, and then Katie or Sarah or Carrie, if you want to close us out. Thanks.
Amen.
Amy. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Aggie. We're going to end every Zoom that way until we can all hold hands in the same room. If people want to unmute themselves and say hello, we welcome you to do that. Thank you.
Hi, everybody.
Really sincerely for sharing so much tonight. It was such a special treat to
It was great. It was
hear your
great.
reflections.
Great to see you, Aggie.
Amazing. Thank you.
You look great.
Great program.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Yeah.
I'm featuring incarcerated artists in my podcast for the month of January.
Great.
Drop the link to your podcast in the chat if you have a second. I know many of us would love to tune in.
Yeah, it's a great
Definitely.
podcast. I listen to it all the time and I haven't heard that one yet.
Thank you. So I'm featuring Frederick Hudson, who's the collector, Helene Flowers, who I met via the MoMA PS1, and then another young man who started the jumpsuit project, and his name is
Not
Cheryl Rowland.
Cheryl Rowland, a Creative Capital winner as of a week ago.
right.
Yes,
And Skowhegan.
Justice Fellow.
yes, and he met Arkman Niles there. He was telling me his whole story. So yeah, I'm excited about it.
Great.
Yeah, feel good stories. They're all great guys. It's been an interesting journey for me to get to know all of them.
Risa, do you want to shout out a couple other artists that we didn't mention?
Well, you know, Deanna Van Buren, you really can't talk about this conversation without her. And Deanna, she's an architect, and her shop is called Designing Justice, Designing Spaces. And so when we talk about this world without prisons, that's a lovely concept, but Deanna's work is very much about what does that look like in concrete terms? What are the buildings? What are the processes? What are the structures? So if you don't know anyone else's name but Deanna Van Buren, look her up.
That's right. That's right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Aggie, Kat, and Jamie. That was amazing.
Amazing.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you so
much.
Bye.
Bye,
And-
Lucy.
Hey,
Hey. Thank you.
Happy
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Stay safe and healthy.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Night, everyone.
Bye, Karen.
I love this part. Hi, Sarah.
I think Carrie and I win because we both had parents who tuned in.
I love it.
That was
Mine already left, I think.
Jamie, I
All
think
right, Catherine's fine.
two, right? Did you have two?
you had two.
You have two?
Bennett's.
Yes. My parents have been married 51 years. They don't like to sit in the same room anymore.
You're not supposed to say that, Jamie.
Sorry. I just bought their anniversary present, which is next weekend. So I was thinking about the 51 years.
What's the anniversary? What's the thing on 51?
I don't know. So I found a set of coins that were minted in 1969.
Oh, good.
So they're getting a penny, nickel, dime, quarter from 1969.
Oh, I love that.
You're saying that made me realize my parents celebrated their anniversary this year. They're 69 also, but I totally missed it in quarantine. I'm a bad
I think
daughter.
it's a good idea for a makeup gift.
I know, I think so.
Excuse me, I just want to tell Catherine, Kathy DeMo shows my friend, and I emailed her what you said.
Oh my God, it was like nobody's asked me that. So Jamie, thank you for the question, but it was so fun. And I don't remember the gallery. Do you remember?
Steve knows the gallery.
I think it was Sean Kelly. He had one show there if he bought it in New York.
It was Sean Kelly. And I wandered in. I was with Aggie and she was going to her galleries and I walked in. It was ages ago, decades ago. And I said, oh, I
have a work by Kathy too. And she had one show at Sean Kelly and I figured it was that.
It was that show.
That's
Well, she says hi.
Well, oh, that's beautiful. Well, I still have the piece and I love it. And after raising, in addition to my daughter and younger child, my twin boys and all of their friends, because it definitely is a very suggestive piece, but you have to find it, like it's in the corner.
It looks like the Inquisition, I think. I have a feeling what it is. It's like vaginal and Inquisition.
I know. And it's like they all have this knife sticking out of each one. And
Yeah,
it's
I know the work.
for me.
Aggie, you started it with the pussy hats. Don't make a face now.
True.
Oh, I love that you let her know. Well, that's great.
Thank you.
Nice. Such a great piece. That's good.
Hi,
Okay.
Paula.
There's
Paula.
Paula with the dog. Within the look at and Joe is a dog too.
This is Oliver.
Oliver. Oh my God, look at this.
Oh, look at them. I wish the whole show was dogs.
Well, Aggie, do you know who Paula Pelosi's dog's cousin is?
Who? Me.
Paula Pelosi's dog's cousin is Ivana Mestrovich's dog, Ivana, who works with Mark DeSuver.
Oh, yeah, I know. Oh, No, that
Dog pedigree is very important.
Well,
I
Look at Eric's Christmas tree. That's lovely.
I like dogs.
I like
Dogs are
Christmas
my
trees.
favorite.
Aggie likes ill-behaved dogs.
Look down. Dog and
The
it's, it is well behaved at this moment.
At this moment, you don't hear it. Yeah.
You know, David Beitzel would have enjoyed this.
Oh,
I was thinking of him.
I think about him often.
As
Right.
do I. You know, I went, if anyone is in Katona, his brother owns Hickory and Tweed, which is an outing where like a ski shop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
It's a
stopped
family
there
business.
and it was fantastic because it is covered with photos of David and his brothers and his dad skiing. And I was just like, it was great. It was
That's
really,
the family business that was spoken of.
yeah, it's really nice. So
That's nice.
anyway, yeah.
It's good.
We were on a Zoom with Darren the other night, and outside the window of his new place is, you can see Park Avenue, and there are all the Christmas trees. So it looks just like Eric's frame, because he was sitting there, but it was outside a window, but there was this big Christmas tree. It was really, that was cute.
Did they have good big lights or the small lights?
The small, the ones on the trees on Park.
Yep. Yep.
Well, this was special. Thank you guys.
Right.
Really.
Nice
Have
to-
a
so
wonderful,
much.
healthy holiday. Hopefully 2021 is going to be a better start for everyone. So
By the
I hope so,
dumpster
too.
fire of 2020. Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Everyone,
Safe.
thank everyone. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.
Bye.
Night.